Welcome to the after lunch, the graveyard session, but I hope it won't be a deathly silent room here. Judging by the experiences of the first two sessions, I'm quite optimistic that there will be an active and lively discussion during this panel. And if not, Harold has threatened to sing the Austrian anthem. So I hope you will start thinking of your questions as soon as these gentlemen start talking. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Judi Seebus, editor of PropertyEU, and the slide should appear now. PropertyEU is a pan-European real estate publication. We cover all real estate asset classes, offices, retail, logistics, and even student housing, as you can see there. We also we have a daily newsletter, a monthly magazine, and annual products like the Top Investors. Anyway, that's enough about myself. I just wanted to set the scene. This, I think, is a really interesting topic that we're about to discuss today, what's happening in European markets. I think we've already learned this morning that a lot is happening in Europe, and we have a great panel here of experts from different markets around Europe who can tell us about the UK, but then and also with a pan-European perspective. This is Marcus Roberts from Savills. He's head of student investment and development. Marcus has been involved in a number of acquisitions of buildings and development sites in the UK and Europe, so he's well placed to set the scene with a presentation of that of the market in Europe. Before I give the floor to Marcus, I'll just continue with the people on my to my right. Rainer Nonnengesser, Managing Director at MPC Munchmeyer Peterson Real Estate Consulting. I had to write it down. Okay, Rainer has been in the business for more than 20 years, and he brings to the discussion a background in project development, asset management, and operational processes as well, and investment. Right. And then we have, I've got cards here, number coded, so hope I won't get lost. Harold Hubel, Investment Director of Value One Group, but also Director of Business Development at Milestone. And he's based in Vienna, has a banking background, yes. So we'll hear more about his experiences of the Austrian and Swiss market later. And then to my left, Vincent Rouget, Managing Director of Perella Weinberg Real Estate, and a relative newcomer to the student housing market. Brand new, there you go.
The non-expert.
The non-expert, but he's got a vision. This man's got a vision, and he's going to tell you about it later. An investor in the student hotel. So we'll be interested to find out why Perella Weinberg made that investment. Before I give the floor to Marcus, I just would like to show a couple of slides to set the scene a little bit before we get started. Just see if I can do it. Yeah, this is an overview of some of the deals, transactions that we've reported on in Europe in the past year, and you'll see from the slide that the UK dominates. I mean, we don't cover the whole market. We do our best to report on as many transactions as we can. But I think this gives an indication of where the market is at this moment. The most activity that we've seen in terms of transactions are in the UK. If you look at some of the names on that list, I think that is also an indication of where the market is going. We're seeing at the very top a name that has come to Europe, or to the UK first, Greystar from the US. So I think they obviously see potential on this side of the Atlantic. And there are also a number of other big names like LaSalle Investment Management. Unite, of course, is an established business in the industry, but we're seeing also BlackRock. So I think these are interesting indications of what investors think about this market. Next slide, yeah, and then we've got Perella Weinberg at the top here with some of the financiers of development projects that we've come across. Again, the majority are in the UK, but we're seeing, like the student hotel that's based in the Benelux, we're seeing International Campus teaming up with Duo in the Netherlands. And was there another one? Have I missed any? No, that was it. No, I have got one. Hansen Asset Management, a UK-based company, also active in the Netherlands. So that gives you an idea of what we may see in the future in terms of development activity. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over this very important tool to Marcus.
Let's see if I can operate it. Which way are we going?
I think it's that one.
Battery seems to have...
You need to switch presentation.
Oh, okay.
You're on.
There we go. Okay. Exit stage left. I'm just going to give a very quick overview of what's been happening in the European market, what's sort of driving the interest in the sector, and I guess sort of why are we all here today. As we can see from this slide, I think it's just quite, it's putting everything into perspective. So what sort of happened over the last sort of 5-6 years or so, looking at the US market, looking at the UK market, and what's happening in Western Europe in terms of number of sort of deals done. In terms of, so we've sort of seen a huge growth over the last sort of 2-3 years that's been driven by certainly the US money, Canadian money, looking at the student market, both obviously in the US but also in the UK. If we look at sort of 2014, this year, we have seen probably about £1.5 billion of transactions in the UK alone. And that's just putting things into perspective with Western Europe. And Western Europe, the yellow on the chart there, covers 10 countries. And we've seen probably about 275 to 300 million euros of deals done. So as we can see, when comparing the UK to Western Europe, it's a very mature market at present. And that's being, the interest being driven by, again, the likes of Oaktree Capital, Knightsbridge Student Housing, Crosslane, Victor's Fund, so the UK, the US operators looking at starting to build sort of platforms in the various sort of European markets. But also a lot of that, as we're seeing from the number around the table today, it's very much organic growth from within jurisdictions. So the likes of MPC and Milestone, who are here today, looking at sort of doing ground-up developments in their particular jurisdictions. The challenge that we have in Europe is really I think it's economies of scale as a real challenge for us across the board. There are no sort of there are no mainstream operators currently in the sector in France, Netherlands, outside of the sort of semi-government operators, the likes of the Cruise, Duo in Netherlands, and I say Cruise in France. It's very fragmented, so actually sort of for some of these operators, the new money entering the sector, it's very difficult to get scale quickly. And hence we're now seeing, I say, the money that is coming in is really looking at development projects because they can build the scale, they can try and identify the sites. As we've heard, identifying the sites and making schemes work is a real challenge for everybody across the board. In terms of sort of size of markets, I'm sure this is sort of fairly well sort of trodden out stats of the size of markets that across Western Europe, the largest being obviously sort of Germany, France, and Spain. And what we have highlighted here again is just the size in the pie of the international market as well. And that we're actually sort of seeing that certainly we're going to be growing a greater attention to the international market over the next sort of 3, 5, 10 years as more students look to study outside of their country of domicility. In terms of provision rates in the UK, in Europe, so we're comparing sort of UK, which is at around the sort of 23% mark, and that's a sort of key sort of driver for interest in the sector. Now, as an investor coming into the market, you're looking at how many full-time students there are in a particular country and a particular city, and the number of sort of purpose-built student bed spaces that are currently being provided, i.e., what size of market is there, what are the challenges. And obviously, if we look at sort of a more sort of granular basis, sort of city by city, then the dynamics sort of change even further to sort of 20, 30, 40%, whatever it may be in that particular location. What, again, this does show is that provision rate is relatively low across Europe. It's probably around 12, 13% compared to, say, the 25% mark where we're currently at in the UK. Italy, sort of furthest right, is probably at the lowest point, about sort of 2 to 3% provision, and that's largely sort of due to, I think, the Italian students wanting to live at home. They're trying to find it very difficult to cut the apron strings from mama's cooking. Just a sort of final slide, just about sort of where we're seeing sort of market maturity. So where do the European markets fit compared to sort of the US and the UK? So furthest right is the most mature market. Then sort of coming in, we've got France, and we'll probably sort of talk a little more about each individual market and what's sort of driven the position on that sort of maturity slide that we have here. And then sort of following to Germany, Netherlands, and as I say, Italy at the far left-hand side being sort of the least mature at the moment.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yep, great. Thanks. I'm going to pass this important tool to Rainer, and maybe we can hear something more about the German market.
Yeah, as soon as the slides are uploaded.
Yep.
Here they are. When you're talking about student accommodation in Germany, I think you have to embed this picture into the overall trend that we see on the resi market in Germany. We have some 40 million households in Germany, out of which currently some 40% are single-person households, with an increasing trend. We are currently in a situation that 75% of the whole households are singles and double income, no kids structures, with an increasing trend. If you take a look at the rental offer in the resi market, it's just the opposite. The vast majority, more than 80%, is family-focused layout, just varying in size. And the number of 1- and 2-room apartments in Germany for rent sum up to less than 5% of the overall resi market. So there's already a complete dislink between demand and offer in the resi market per se. And embedded in that picture, you have a situation that we currently have around 2.6 million students, full-time students in Germany. If you deduct those who stay with their parents, at least initially when they take on studies, you end up with a figure of around 2 million who need accommodation. The market leader, to be touched on later, is a non-profit organization throughout the 16 federal states, providing some 200,000 very basic dorm product beds. So you end up with 1.8 million young people in Germany who have to organize their accommodation by themselves, and they are flooding on a regular basis when semester starts in October into this stretched resi market. If you take a look at the pie chart on the right, it displays the difference between the current situation of accommodation for young people and their desired accommodation. And for sure, there's a big chunk who stays with the parent who would love not to stay with their parents. But we also see that there is a significant mismatch between those who would love to have a studio-type apartment and those who currently have one. And this is describing the undersupply in that area. Who are the players currently? As mentioned, we have traditionally, when the higher education system was rebuilt after the Second World War, a non-profit organization operating through the 16 federal states. It's the so-called Studentenwerke. If you add a few beds provided by church-linked organization and other non-profit foundations, you sum up roughly with 230,000 beds that are offered by these organizations for the mentioned 2 million students. These are, in the vast majority, products that go back to the 60s and 70s, very basics. The most of them have not seen any refurbishment initiatives in the last 20 years due to budget constraints of the public authorities. And if you take a look at the list of those who have a nationwide approach in a modern studio-type student accommodation product, it's a little bit more than a handful already, but it only takes a few hundred apartments to be among the top 10. And I think, Horst, currently you are the number one. When we combine the operated plus the developed schemes with roughly 2,400, which is compared to mature markets like the UK, next to nothing.
Are there any international players in the gender market yet?
There are some backing equity-wise, but so far not actively in the market with an operational platform. But I'm quite sure that some in this audience have plans in the back of their head to think about the European continent, and if you do so, I think it's quite obvious that you take a look into Germany, as it is one of the bigger markets. Taking a look at the development of students, we have seen a sharp increase in the last years for various reasons, changes in the time of secondary school, waiving of military service. And there are a lot of discussions amongst public authorities, also on the investor side, whether this is just a one-hit wonder, is that a sustainable trend? And I think what we have to have in the back of our head, or what is clearly expressed also by these figures, is that we see a trend of having more than 400,000 first-year students on an annual basis for the next 10 years, which underpins the robustness of the trend. And all prognoses that have been released by the government in the past have been very conservative. And what these current figures do not reflect, from my point of view, is a steady increase that we see from international students, where we traditionally have a very low chunk of around 10%. But due to the economic situation we have in Europe, with unemployment rates amongst young people in Greece, in Italy, in Spain, in France, who are more than double-digit, we see strong inflows from young people out of these countries to Germany, which are not reflected in that figures. So in a nutshell, I'm quite convinced that we will have a very robust trend, also long-term sustainable. And if you just make one little math exercise and apply the current recovery rate of the UK to Germany, in the UK I think it's currently around 24%, you end up with a gap between current supply and then required demand of around 400,000 units, a little bit more than 400,000 euros. And I think that displays how vital this market is and which potential it provides. It's completely immature, and I think there are a lot of opportunities going along with that.
Okay, great. We'll discuss that in more detail later on, but maybe Harold, you can show us some of the developments that you're involved
So right
in.
is right and left is left. Okay. Ollie, can you put them on as well?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go.
That's Austria. To translate that into general understanding, that's Mozartkugel, that's Vienna Schnitzel, that's skiing, okay? But joking aside, I mean, this is from the Austrian statistics. You see the number of students, and you see it. You can have the slide. You see it from what type of university there are. As the private universities, the public universities, are the Fachhochschulen, one of the applied sciences, and you see obviously there's a focus on the numbers we mentioned today, the 190,000 that you have in Vienna. And that's obviously in a population of 8 million people. That's quite a lot. And overall, the other larger cities are Graz with roughly 60,000 students, Salzburg roughly 20,000 students, and then with a little bit more than 30,000 students, you get Innsbruck, which is my favorite city, because if you arrive at the airport in Innsbruck and you take the bus to the main university, which roughly takes 10 minutes, at the first airport bus stop, students are entering the bus. Because it's such a small city and so dense, it's very tricky to find something. So even in the airport bus, which is typically not where you expect them, you get students. So that's Austria overall. So 1/10 of the population of Germany roughly, but a higher percentage of students, roughly 360,000 in total. That's milestone 1. You've seen it from the photovoltaics angle that Maureen showed us today. That's more our focus, where you have the 429 apartments and you see the lobby, because the community aspect is something that we want to emphasize in a house that started off with more than 60% international students. It's coming to a more 50-50 ratio as well, but still a very international house with more than 40 nations in it. That's our lobby. Not all these chairs stay there, but we decided anyway to have them because we like them and we wanted to have the feeling of it. And we had this living room concept. We have one type of apartment, which is a single apartment, where you can sleep here. You've got a little kitchenette, and obviously shower facilities in there. And that's the milestone. We opened our first one in October 2013. Before Christmas, I hope to have the 5th house under planning. We'll have at least 2 in Vienna, one in Graz, one in Salzburg. And as we entered into a cooperation with the largest real estate owner in Austria, we'll have one in Innsbruck, which is the tricky market I told you about, as well very soon. I think that's very brief.
Yep,
Austria.
great. Maybe we can have the next slides put up.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for our final presentation. There you go.
Thanks. So this is the advertising part, basically. As a non-expert, as you mentioned, as Judi mentioned, we are newcomers to the sector. To say 2 words about Perla Weinberg Real Estate, we are a private equity real estate fund investor, and we invest across real estate strategies in terms of direct property portfolios, companies, operating companies linked to real estate or which are able to produce real estate, basically. We tended historically to invest more in the office sector and the retail sector, as well as a bit of residential across markets in Europe, but predominantly in Germany, France, UK, and Spain. So it's our first foray as well in the Netherlands through this investment in the student hotel. Since I'm not an expert, I won't give you stats about French market or the Netherlands market, even though I got a few answers from the team here. I think it was potentially interesting to mention why we came to this investment and what was the rationale behind. I think generally speaking, and again, I will not give stats, we feel that there's a very positive momentum and dynamic in the student housing sector across Europe. We see the huge liquidity basically in the UK market with some new investors, foreign investors pouring into this market because it's the most mature. And we feel that a number of the continental European markets are basically far away from this stage. And that's where we see potentially our investment strategy to potentially interesting to support basically the growth of the student hotel and their concept across Europe. We see also potentially the student housing market in the currently challenged economic environment in Europe as one of the potential growth areas, I would say around the knowledge economy, where we see that a number of political decision makers are trying to find ways to support growth, and we see clearly this field as a growth support and a growth contributor in the future years. I think on the decision to invest and to partner with the student hotel, the primary point for us was that it was not so much a product, but more a concept. And that's what we liked about this concept. We felt it was pretty distinctive and creative and innovative. The mix of use, the mix of generations inside the building, the positioning on large properties compared to the competition. Potentially, if I take the example in France, typically student housing developers are looking at properties around 6,000-7,000 square meters. Here, the TSH properties are between 15,000 and 25,000 square meters, with a mix of use, big common areas which you need to operate potentially, because you don't charge immediate rent to students on those products, potentially nightclubs on certain of the projects. So we liked this positioning, and we felt it was quite creative and had some potential to further European expansion beyond the Dutch and the Benelux markets. In other words, it's not only real estate for us, it's also a business, and that's where we saw most of the potential to some extent, because you work around the student community, but you are also on the hotel operation side with this hybrid model that combines basically short stay, hotel operation and student housing across the year, academic year versus summer, as it was mentioned by some participants this morning. We believe a lot in the community, and we feel that there are some ancillary businesses and activities to develop as well alongside this, which can be potentially incubators, fostering growth investments in startups and things like that. We participate to this kind of community. So we saw it as a much broader, basically, than a pure property investment.
Can you maybe give an example of what you mean by an ancillary type of operator?
It can be offices. It can be providing some flexible office space, potentially to universities to provide in a new town, foreign town, summer courses, for instance, to establish the company as a partner to universities. We have the capacity as a fund and a very flexible mandate, basically, to invest in different type of real estate. So we can position ourselves on 30, 40, 50,000 square meter offices or properties, for instance, where we're going to say on 20,000 square meter, we'll put a student hotel, and then we'll manage the rest as residential or as office. So we have this kind of flexibility, which we believe in certain markets and certain cities can be quite interesting as well.
So what you're saying is also the mixed scheme, that's an attractive
yes.
option
yeah.
for Perella.
Exactly. Thirdly, and more importantly, I think it was also the management team. We felt that there was a great team, highly creative concept, and that was a key driver for us, basically, to invest in the student hotel. So I would say less of an expert view on the sector, but a mix of reasons that brought us into this exciting sector.
Yeah, great.
So I was going to say, on the operational side, that's a real fundamental difference between sort of UK and US and Europe. There are very few management platforms out there that people can invest into. We are starting to see the Knightsbridges of this world who are coming, using their economies of scale from the UK, delivering the projects here. The European market is very fragmented. Certainly, sort of Germany, a lot of that is, it's run by smaller operators rather than, say, the national chains, for want of a better word. That is certainly changing. But that is the challenge that New Money has got, of trying to sort of build something in the European market.
Yeah. What about Germany? Do you think the student hotel concept could work there?
Well, I think you have to have in your reflection different regulations. Yeah. In Germany, what we do as student accommodation is a resi product, full stop, as regards building regulation, as regards zoning, as regards financing, and so on. And as soon as you start mixing it with a hotel-type product, you're mixing resi with commercial. It's possible for sure. Some do so, yeah. But you're limiting yourself as regards your pipeline of feasible land, yeah. because the number of sites who would embody a such product is very much limited. And that's, I think, also one of the outcomes of the discussion that we had tomorrow. There's no one-fits-all model in continental Europe. Yeah? We are one market, sure, and we have a strong cross-border traffic by students, but locally, the rules and regulations of the businesses are completely different.
Yeah. It's difficult, indeed. There's a lot of work to do around the legal constraints in each country. They vary from one country to the other. We see a substantial opportunity across Europe, and our feeling is that there's quite some space for every type of model, basically. We feel with the student hotel potentially that we're not going to open in each and every country in Europe like 10 projects. Basically, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the market conditions and the opportunities. And it's important to find the right building as well. It can be conversions, it can be ground up. So each project is very specific, I would say. And with this model, we think we can live with the other type of positioning as well, and not necessarily compete, but work together to some extent to offer another type of option to international students.
Conversion that's one of the themes that you brought up as well. How do you see that developing in Germany?
Well, I think we have in Germany a situation that resi development is pretty much a local business, and it's primarily a privatization business where the people developing sites and schemes dispose to occupy owners. And their math is different from ours. And we are primarily competing when it comes to sites with these guys. And for technical reasons, they can afford higher prices than we do. So having access to outdated office buildings is for us a vital option to get access to high-quality products. Because as regards layouts and micro locations, most of these do not suit for hotel conversions because they're too sizey, or they do not fit for other use because of the floor layouts or as regards the micro location. But for student accommodation, there is a high probability of a good to perfect fit.
And the maths work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it gives the investor the advantage of speed to market rather than actually sort of looking at sort of something that's ground up and waiting 12 months to get your planning permit, and then potentially another 2 years to sort of develop and get the scheme to become income producing.
I still think the location is important, and some of the, I'm thinking of Frankfurt, some of the Niederrad office spaces that you get, it's easy, 3 million gets you an office plot, but you still don't want to have student housing there necessarily. No. And I think the speed to market is an issue, but we are down to less than 12 months of construction time now.
You mean for greenfield development?
Yes, for greenfield. Fast greenfield is the preference. Obviously, I think because it's easier to have your layouts and your efficiency there. But planning consent is always an issue. I mean, we were extremely lucky to do it in 6 months' time in Graz now, but that's an exceptional situation even for us.
Okay, what's the norm then?
If it's part of a large development, it can come up to 2 years. But I think in a year's time you can do that. But still, the real estate product is a slow product.
I was going to say, in terms of France, I mean, you've got the added layer of the political machinations there, and the lack of understanding about student housing as we know it now, the purpose-built product. And that, I think, has taken, well, it's starting to get, say, a little easier. I mean, I use the word easier so lightly. But I think there's been quite a bit of movement, both through, obviously, the class of 2020, schemes that Jacina, for example, have been developing as being an institutional investor into the product, and showing that a scheme of 200 to 300 new build beds run by an institutional investor as well can work, and that actually you don't have the political and social challenges that have sort of shrouded the development of the student market in France it can largely be that they can understand that there's an awful lot more transparency around the operational side of the business now than there certainly had been in the past.
Yeah.
How does it work in the UK? I mean, to go back to the beginning, if you like, the UK and the US are sort of like they're the mature markets. I mean, how did they develop so well?
I mean, it's going back to the sort of the early 1990s with the when Unite were formed, converting actually office buildings, I think, in sort of central Bristol, at least working with universities to take sort of long-term sort of partner agreements that, I think Philip Hillman, who's here, is certainly sort of the godfather in that respect. And from there, it was very much sort of ground-up development in the late 1990s, early 2000s, with the likes of Victoria Hall, Unite, especially Downing Developments. And they were developer operators. And were able, because funding in the market, the lack of understanding around the market, it was sort of relatively immature. And again, that's where we are in the European field. And it's only been in the last sort of couple of years that we've started to see more direct investment into student housing in the UK from institutional investors through the likes of LaSalle, BlackRock. And what is encouraging is also a number of European institutional investors investing in the UK as well. So the Balfonds, for example, have acquired a couple of assets in Scotland, and then indirect investment into the likes of UPP by PPGM, for example, the Dutch pension fund.
Yeah. Okay. The word partnership came up in one of the previous sessions. Is that something, that partnerships between the universities and the authorities and developers, is that something that you're seeing in your respective markets? Harold?
We opened our milestone, which is 150 meters from the University of Economics in Vienna, on the 1st of October, because I know that Weistin personally, I showed her on the day before, but this was the first time there was an interaction between Milestone and the university. I mean, that's probably an extreme scenario, but I think it shows you that the publicly funded universities are very academia-focused. Where people live has not been so much of an issue. And I think, in a city of 1.8 million people, that might not be so surprising, but even in the smaller ones, there is not a lot of interaction. It is changing. It is changing for Fachhochschulen or universities that open up campuses. For them, it's a big concern. What is the overall package? And if they do the planning of their land, they look into that subject as well. But for the established universities that have been there for 200 years, it has not been a big focus.
Pretty much the same in Germany. The university system is a public-funded system. They're focused on education and research. They don't care about housing. And as mentioned, we have this non-profit organization who runs the 200,000 beds. As long as there was no mismatch back in the 80s and 90s, everything was fine. But then time went fast, and the universities do not have a mandate to cope with it. And therefore, it's not a topic for them. And as Harald just said, in the metropolitan areas, it's less of an issue. Yeah? We have in Germany 120 cities hosting universities. Even those who have more than 10,000 students, you end up with a list of 60 cities. If you take, for example, Tübingen, a small town 15 kilometers away from Stuttgart, they have 55,000 inhabitants and 38,000 students. And in markets like this, it becomes an issue that the public budgets are not able to fund appropriate developments to at least ensure a basic accommodation rate for those structures.
Yeah. And what about the international students that you referred to? Which cities are they going to?
Well, not only among students, among young people, Berlin is very hip. So it has a magnetic effect on young people and therefore also on students. But the same applies to cities like Leipzig or Dresden, who are very vital, young, design-oriented, a lot of arts around it. But there are also traditional universities like Heidelberg, Freiburg, where you have strong medical faculties, for example, or just mentioned Tübingen, you find not than 15% international rates. And I think someone mentioned that earlier, especially when it comes to arts and music, ballet, and so on. A lot of Japanese and Korean people are also in Germany on these faculties.
What about the Austrian market? Is that attracting any international student?
Yes, and primarily Vienna. I mean, that's the highest rate. Innsbruck attracts some of them as well. The others do, but not to that large extent. But I think it will change, and it very much depends also what's your offer, what's your speciality. I mean, we've got something that Montan University, so how, in my simplification of how to dig holes. They need a lot of space because they attract a lot of international students, and the little village there in that just cannot keep that at all. But I think the international students is who is traveling. I mean, if you look at some of the charts, I think there are Chinese and Japanese that go through the effort of learning German to go to some of the universities there. Then, if you would do that courses in English, I think the dynamic would look quite differently. I mean, that's, I think, one of the plans that Netherlands has as well. I mean, you switch the language, it attracts much more international mobility.
Okay, and how important is location? I mean, we talked about the offices that can be converted, but are they not located in the wrong place?
Yes and no. Location is key. You always have to find the right compromise between having access to the university by public transport, by bike, and on the other hand also to leisure and nightlife. Yeah, so somewhere out of town doesn't work. Yeah. And we have, in most of the bigger cities in Germany, we have former, let's say, kind of CBD areas that are passing away. And not necessarily Niederrad, nobody wants to lie dead in Niederrad. But there are other opportunities. You have to be selectively, but you'll find a lot that would fit.
So what would be your hotspots if you looked at the German market at this moment? You mentioned a number of cities, but maybe in terms of districts?
Well, in Frankfurt, that's for sure the area around Mainzer Landstraße. That's also Bockenheim, where the former campus was. And in Hamburg, it's for sure Ottensen, Altona, so the lively spots. Yeah. And as German cities do not tend to be as geographically large as, for example, London or Paris, yeah, public transport is less than an issue. Yeah, within 20 to 30 minutes, you can pass wherever you want.
Yeah.
But the conversion play from office to student housing as well is enabled, I think, in the German market, for instance, by the low level of rents on the office segment. If you look at markets like Paris, like London, the land values are extremely high, and in the end,
doesn't make sense.
No, you cannot compete. You cannot compete against hotel, for instance, or you cannot compete against office alternatives on many occasions when you breach the, let's say, 250 to 300 euro per square meter type of rent. Because in office products, basically, you charge rent on the corridors and the common parts, which you don't in the end on the student housing. So that's also a key factor. And the advantage of the German market is that you have low rents on the office sector in good central locations on some cities, which you don't necessarily find, for instance, in Paris or even Paris region in the close suburb, because the office market is too strong.
Yeah.
So that's also quite a key factor.
But maybe in other cities in France?
It would apply more to, when we look at the French market, for instance, we feel that the regional markets are much more suited to do that. We are a majority shareholder in a construction and development company based in Toulouse, for instance. They operate on those kind of markets in addition to Paris region, and you see that there, basically you develop brand new offices for 160 to 180 euro per square meter prices, and office tenants in those markets tend to be very fine going on brand new offices on the outskirts on public transportation, rather than refurbishing a property in the city center And the cost of refurbishment is extremely high compared to the cost of building new, given the low land value. So these are typically markets where you feel that those kind of conversions would be more applicable than Paris or Paris region. Then if you want a flagship, it can be different.
Yeah.
As a business, as a European platform, for instance, it can be interesting to be in Paris, even though the numbers stack up less than elsewhere.
I guess as an international investor, you're wanting the brand new building rather than continually having a supply, a portfolio made up of office conversions in sort of downtown Bordeaux or something. But
It depends. We were on a property tour and we were visiting with various team members at Perla Weinberg and our local partners in each market. We were touring the various properties in Netherlands with a student hotel team. And when we were visiting one of the criteria, we went through the criteria list with Charlie McGregor and his team in terms of layout, in terms of sizes and so on. And at the end, the last criteria was, we like buildings with a soul. And the soul, you don't get it from brand new buildings, basically. Yes. You can get it sometimes on some locations and with certain design, but old buildings you convert are pretty interesting from that perspective as well, even though you have to deal with the specific property constraints there. So it's very much a case-by-case basis, I would say, on most of the projects. It's difficult to say we have a typical model, industrial model, which we roll out, basically.
But scale is important, as you said.
Scale is important, and this is a model where you're right. This is a model which mixes the uses, and so hotel use is easier in city centers than in the outskirts. Mm-hmm. So you have to balance a bit all those criteria to make it work.
I guess certainly in terms of the office conversions, you're not actually getting, again, the economies of scale, the number of beds within that you need to drive management efficiencies. Typically you're still looking at 300 to 350 beds almost as a minimum to really get those economies of scale within a new town if you're investing in a city for the first time. But there are a number of investors who are looking at, as I say, the speed to market. It's trying to buy something that is at the smaller end to get a foothold to say brand, and then be able to sort of leverage off that both through sort of planning terms, but also relationships with universities, etc.
Yeah. And our experience is also once you have your foot in the ground in a certain city, you'll be amazed what else comes out in the location. I mean, we thought we had a nice location in Graz, and suddenly we start constructing, and we have the capacity to do more. Next to the campus, something came up. A private individual who said, okay, you guys can actually build this. Something that we wouldn't have found via contacts or due diligence or whatever. It's just, I think opportunities arise, especially in markets like Austria, where the product is not as known as in places like Germany.
Yeah, so the importance of local market intelligence. Yeah.
I mean, just one aspect on the conversions. One thing that we struggle with, and because part of another division does commercial real estate as well, is the energy efficiency of old office towers is so tricky. It becomes it's easy to tear them down, as that sounds, but it's a 20-year-old office space. Energy-wise, it's not state-of-the-art anymore.
Does that apply to you as well, Rainer?
I think there is no one-fits-all assessment. Yeah, in most of the cases, you have to strip back to the concrete, renew the facade, and then you overcome situations that an investor would not be stuck with an old property because then it's principal brand new. And in most of the cases, you have a situation that, as regards the current zoning, you would never get again a new building permit to go that high, for example. Yeah. So you have areas where the surrounding is 6-7 stories, your property is 14 or 18. Yeah, make use of it, and by converting it, you can make use of it. So it's always an individual case. Yeah, and what we do, we also focus on a higher energetic standard than legally required for several reasons. The main reasons are the operational sustainability becomes then more affordable, and secondly, we have state-subsidized financing programs in Germany through a state-run bank, They provide you a very decent financing. It's roughly currently at 1% for 10 years without any limitations on payback. So you would be stupid not to use it, because the money spent on the higher energy efficiency is not wasted. Yeah, you have a payback over the whole life cycle of the building.
Yeah, okay.
And they're colder winters as well than you have in the UK.
Potentially, yes. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned the point of financing. Student housing is still a relatively new product. How easy or difficult is it to find financing? I mean, we've got very low rates, but are there a lot of lenders lining up?
In principle, it's quite simple. It's time consuming, as every topic you deal with banks today is time consuming. But as mentioned, it's a resi product, and banks love resi because there are limited risks going along with it. You have in principle, no anchor tenancy risk, yeah? And you have no alternative use risk in principle, and that's why. And yeah, they're queuing. And with this mentioned state-provided financing, they have a severe competition, which they have to face.
From
KfW, which
okay.
is a state
okay.
banking arm.
Right.
And their programs are focusing on, in principle, raising the energetic standard on new construction or on conversions. They have several programs. The common sense of these is that they provide low interest rates and high flexibility as regards payback and so on. Yeah?
Okay, and what about alternative lenders?
Yeah, the traditional banks, as said, love the product, and you get decent financing, and also on LTC rates. I think we're back at around 70, 75, as you wish, and even in the development phase.
Okay.
And so the financing is not the bottleneck.
It's not an issue.
And margin-wise, do you reach the UK market conditions? We saw some CMBS pricing at 125 or 140 over recently. Is it the type of condition in Germany?
If you go through traditional financings, it's 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 in that range. And if you can blend it with these KfW,
you get to
significantly below 2.
Okay, and what about in Austria? Are the bankers lining up there as well?
A high savings rate, lots of liquidity in the market. The loan to cost, loan to value of 80%, with margins of 125 basis points is kind of the basis we see. I think the product
what
is...
names?
Names. Have this discussion later.
But I think it always...
Introduce you to.
I mean, it's always, once you have your first properties and the people understand the scheme, it's quite easy, I think. Partly, and I think we've seen it from the questions, it's like educating institutional investors, that will take some time as well. I think one of the classes of investors that we have rarely spoken about today is, it's closer to our nature, is the family office type. It's just, the investment committee is usually a much easier process. They usually have kids in an age that study as well, so you get some sense. I mean, that's a much easier interaction to tap into the private into private wealth as well, but there's a lot about it. And some of the I mean, we really have all our models right now in Austria. We develop our own things. We do things in partnership. We just operate a property. And one of the things that came about was that one of the people said, from a family trust that we know well, said, I like the product. I want that in Salzburg. Please, can you operate it for me? I build it, don't worry. I build it to higher specifications than you even have, because I want to have something nice on the property that will be in the family for a long period of time. And that is obviously a great situation for us as well, and brings us enormous scalability very quickly as well.
But your model is slightly different to, I guess, Reiner's, which is more on the direct let side. You're the owner operator. You're very much the tenant, sort of taking a 25-year lease.
We do a long-term lease on it, and that means we have to we have to do we take certain risks on that way as well. But it's the simplicity of the product is something people like as well.
Yeah.
It's like a tenant, and then it reduces what you're doing to the rate per square meter that you're paying. And that makes it very easy for people to understand.
What you mentioned before, the availability of credit and family offices that are willing to get into this space, is that maybe holding back the institutional market?
I think the institutional market works well for portfolio size. 50, 100 million packaged up, that's easy. And that's for the amounts of money they need to deploy. I think that's where it comes in. If you're having schemes on a one-on-one basis, it might be easier to tap into the more family money that doesn't buy the next commercial building or the next residential house, but okay, they do something for students this time. 20, 30, 40 million is not that much money for them. So.
No, but the product's not there as well, that sort of scale.
It takes a while, it's real estate, it takes a while to develop.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is, it's not a financial product.
Would you hazard a guess as to how long it might take to develop an institutional market in Austria?
We are trying very hard. We have set up something that can be a portfolio transaction, and some technicalities, and we can conclude it. But it's a year education process. Understanding the product, and it takes a while. It can be done, and sometimes I've been in my life on too many investment committees, and also chairing too many investment committees to have the patience for them anymore. It's like, if you're a large institutional investor, you want to educate yourself about the market. Don't waste my time focused on development, educating yourself about the market. That's, I think, the provocative statement on that, and then I think it will come into it. But why the conversation we had, one of the institutional investors, he said, they want me to do residential. I don't want to do residential because then I need to hire a team. I've got the people moving out. I've got all the tenancy issues that I have to deal with on a single basis. I don't want that asset class. I'd rather deal with one person who rents out to 429 students, and that's it. It's a much simpler, cleaner way. It's much more efficient for them to invest as well.
So not part of a multifamily portfolio?
Yeah.
Okay, what about the German situation?
Well, the German institutional base, client base, is pretty much dominated, as in most other countries, by pension schemes and insurances. The biggest one you've seen this morning. They're not invested in student accommodation.
But they're interested.
Everybody's interested, but they're not invested. Yeah, and as long as they will not be investors, it's hard to convince the others. Yeah, because
you need a first sheep to cross the.
They look at each other. Yeah, and as Harald just said, if you remember my list of actors in the market, half of them have international money backing them, and the other ones who have domestic money, it's families. Yeah. It's families that believe in a story, that believe in a concept, that have a vision of what could become out of it, and they take 25, 35 or 50 million and put it into one developer / operator. And that is then the fundament for growth. Yeah. And for sure, then hopefully at some point in time the next one comes, and you end up in a sustainable growth base.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, I mean, that's part of the challenge, is finding those the management platform. Yeah. And that just doesn't really exist on any real scale for the institutional investors to come into. You know, it's taken them really, say, sort of 10 years to understand and get comfortable with the direct let model in the UK, where they rely on a third-party manager. And that's, there are a number of operators here who are from the UK who are looking at how they can enter the European markets and sort of leverage off the institutional platforms that they have in the UK. So the likes of, say, sort of Rockspring and M&G, a LaSalle, to try and really understand the student market.
But But Marcus, to be provocative as well, is once we have these platforms in scale, they wouldn't get the slight premiums to the residential market that they are able to obtain right now in student housing. They wouldn't like that either once we have reached that situation. So I think it is what it is, and product is available as it is, and that's the tricky thing. But I think you're right. I mean, if you want to invest in residential, there are just many more opportunities than you have if even in a large market like Germany, you got 2.6 million students. It's a smaller niche.
Yeah,
It's a question of size.
I mean, but also if you look at the international market, I mean, the UK, London continues to attract the bulk of international students, even though they are going to Germany and Austria as well. But is that, is the UK always going to just stand out and the rest of Europe will never catch up, or how do you see that?
I think in terms of London, it's very challenging to actually sort of secure sites to develop student housing now because of sort of competing uses, the residential land prices, and offices as well. So I think that yes, it will be there, but I think the European markets, European universities, how they are expanding, say, courses that are being sort of taught in English, but also expanding and their own sort of marketing platform globally and sort of buying into the whole sort of global mobility of students and partnerships, again, with other international universities to sort of try and bring in the students and therefore improve the overall quality of the accommodation that's being provided.
Is the guaranteed occupation from universities, which is quite a UK feature, which you don't really see elsewhere in Europe, a key factor for institutional money to pour in the UK market, or it's a more mature market?
I think that certainly initially institutional money needed the security of income, so a 25-year or 35-year lease in place. And as you say, that just doesn't really exist, sort of speaking generically. And on the European platform, the universities are only focused on academic rather than on the accommodation. But I think that the models that are out there, whether that's through sort of housing associations, the likes of a Milestone, who are taking those sort of 25-year operational leases that are being able to sort of guarantee that income for that period of time. I think that is the first step of bringing in the institutional investor.
But do you think it will be needed in continental European markets to bring the flow of funds to Europe? Or
no, I mean, I think we're already seeing it with the likes of Baufonds, for example, they've got their residential fund about sort of 800, 900 million euros, and they're looking at sort of whether that's a residential fund with student housing part of it, whether they actually look at sort of setting up a sort of bespoke sort of student fund. The likes of Jacina, again, in France, who have 1,500 beds over sort of 9 assets, but an institutional investor who is got their own management platform and taking that direct let risk. Again, you look at France, you've got MACSF and Swiss Life Viveris, who have all entered into that sort of direct let market, or teamed up with an operator such as, I say, an Odelis or somebody like that, who will be sort of guaranteeing taking a 9-year lease on the building.
I think one of the key constraints in continental European markets is the size of investments. We see it in other asset classes. There's a lot of money to be deployed in real estate, and even more basically when you get size and you reach size. We saw that, I mean, one of our major investments was in the debt of Cœur Défense. And one of the questions back in 2009 and 2011 was how many consortium will compete to buy this 1.4 billion property, which had traded in 2007 at 2.2 billion. And we were feeling like we're discussing with various agents, bankers, and the answer was at most 2. And basically in a matter of, I would say, a year and a half, since early 2013, the question was you have potentially 6 or 7 candidates who would take over the single property themselves. Because in one deal, basically they were deploying like 500, 1 billion of equity. And you don't find this in the student housing sector because the nominal sizes are too small. And that's also one of the strategy of the European players or UK players coming to the market to build that critical scale in order to have a portfolio of a few hundred million euros that reaches a certain value because of scarcity. And you'll need to reach those kind of sizes to bring in large institutional investors who could be potentially interested by this investment strategy and asset class, but which is too small today.
So as an extension of that, I mean, in the UK we have, I think there are two dedicated listed vehicles, and there are none as far as I know, although Jacina has student housing, but it's not a dedicated student housing.
But you see 1 billion deals. Brando, for instance, Liberty Living, it's in excess of £1 billion. So you have size on
which is more than the total number of deals of Western Europe so far this year, €275 million.
But so that means when for the foreseeable future, we will probably not see a listed company stand up in Europe, or maybe some of the players in this room are potential candidates at some point? How do you see that?
Probably. It's one of the options among various ones for a number of players who seek European strategies, pan-European strategies. But to be listed, you need to reach a certain scales, usually.
So again, it comes back to scale.
Minimum at usually 1 billion of asset value starts to become the minimum size because you need liquidity, free float, and so on. So that's quite often one of the constraints as well, coupled with the fact that you have lockups and you exit in
that's a lot of beds we need to build.
Months. Yes.
Okay. Will the first listed company come from Germany?
I don't know. A listed real estate doesn't have a fancy tradition in Germany, and also the REIT regime is
not accommodating it.
Not that popular, and there are still restrictions on resi, on the REIT regime. So, to be seen.
Okay. And Austria?
I don't think we're selling.
Okay, good answer. Okay, if we look at, actually, I think I might need to broaden it out because I think we've got another 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I understand there are a couple of people in the room who have experiences of other markets in Europe. Is there anyone who would like to, we've talked a lot about the Northern European markets. Is there anyone in the room who would be interested in, who has something to say about Italy, Spain?
Switzerland.
Well, you were going to talk about Switzerland. No takers?
Hi, Bob Crompton from Knightsbridge Student Housing. We're investing in Spain. We think it's a good market. We think the Spanish language is a real advantage. The number of overseas students we've got in our Madrid residences is almost as high as our London residences. So we're doing 4 deals in Madrid. Barcelona is harder to crack because they think we're Madristas. But we'll do more in Spain. We think Southern Europe is attractive. I think we've looked really hard at Italy, and we've got very close to deals and never actually done one because for political reasons or whatever, it's a difficult place to do real estate business. But the market in Milan, Rome, Venice, Florence is massive for overseas students, and the guy who gets the first mover advantage will do really well in Italy and other southern European jurisdictions. It's just difficult to understand the culture and the tax law and so on and so forth, but we'll get there.
Right, okay. And what sort of developments are you seeing there? Are they greenfield or conversion?
Mostly brownfield, mostly city centre. A lot of our buildings in Madrid are listed, so we've got a retained facade type arrangement, that sort of thing, but I don't think land will ever be cheaper than it is in Madrid at the moment. Same in Barcelona, same in other historical European cities. So we see a real sort of opportunity there for somebody who's prepared to put the work in.
And scalability?
Yeah, scale's there. We'll probably have 3,000 beds in Spain within the next 2 years. We would look to Portugal to get a similar size. The difference is in Spain there's probably only 4 cities that you'd want to be in. Portugal possibly 2 or 3. Italy a lot more, but it's a difficult market. But we can't ignore Southern Europe because it's a huge magnetic draw for students. You know, the number of American students in Florence is phenomenal. They've got to live somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other comments here? Over here.
Fabien Olivierville from Melon District. Yeah, just to complement what Bob was saying, it's true that in Spain the market is still very hot and growing. In Italy, I believe it's true. I mean, the first one who will go to those main capital cities will really get a premium. If you look at the latest numbers on the studying abroad, because we've been talking a lot about the upside that can give you the exchange programs and the American students, the top 5 countries in the world, the first one is still UK, but the second one is Italy. Third one is France, fourth is Spain, and the fifth is now China. But if you're looking at those 2 countries, Spain and Italy being on the top 5 for the US studying abroad, it really means something. And Florence here, there is more than 10,000 American students. So it's quite interesting to look on those markets.
Okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Another one over here.
Xavier.
Okay, yep.
Hi, I'm Doug Platt from Comforts of Home, and we operate in Italy, Spain, and France. And I think I'd echo exactly what Bob and what Fabian have said. Certainly the people who move first in Italy are going to be into large residences are going to be rewarded there. But I guess the caveat that I'd have is, as these gentlemen really well know, it's different operating in a Southern European environment than it is in a Northern European environment. And understanding what those differences are is what makes the difference between success and not success in this market. So, it's everything moves at a slower pace, and from a regulatory perspective, things tend to be just a lot more opaque.
Where do you put France?
I'm not sure you really want an answer. We just opened 500 beds in Paris, and it's taken a long time to do that. So
the good side without the sun. Right?
Okay. I believe there was another question over here. Xavier?
Yes, Xavier Jonge from Bouwfonds. We're also very interested in the Latin countries in Europe. One of the things that we struggle with is the sovereign risk. Because if you get the same kind of yield that you get in countries where the bond spread to the Netherlands is 200 to 500 basis points more, as you get in Amsterdam, how do you compute with that? Do you say, well, this asset on this city is so good and there's so many Americans going to whatever city, because I won't want to name one, that will be stronger than the sovereign risk, basically? Or do you take the opposite angle and say, well, there's actually still quite a bit of mispricing?
Okay, great. Would any one of the panel members like to comment on that?
I'm trying to understand the question. You're saying that the real estate return that you're getting is less than investing in government securities?
No, I'm saying that if you go from a mature market,
Yeah.
which is transparent, has a lot of players, where you have a gross yield of 8%.
Yeah.
Yesterday, some here went to our asset in Amsterdam, which closely 8% gross yield for a new build asset. Now, if you transfer that risk to Southern Europe, and we're a very big fan of Southern Europe, so don't get me wrong, you still also are confronted with uncertainties on the macro level of those countries. And what happens if the Eurozone collapses? What happens with the debt level in those markets? They adjust their prices. And in the same way as the Dutch. Why is the Netherlands interesting? Because the housing market repriced 25%, and the office market arguably even more. And the repricing in some let properties, not for instance the owner-occupier market in Spain collapsed a lot, but the letting market, not that much. The spreads are relatively low. So the question is, do you think you are rewarded for the macro risk? I'm switching from the asset class, the building, to the country risk, and whether the combination of the two is sufficiently rewarded for the return that you get.
I would say probably not in reality, but it depends which benchmark you look at. If you compare sovereign bonds where they trade, we saw some relationship, but to some extent in the current environment where there's so much capital, you see the rebound in Spain, for instance, And you would say, the prices are too expensive on the basis of comparing Bund to basically the 10-year Spanish government bond. So it's not easy to find such a correlation, I would say, and you will not find the difference in yields. You will not find this difference into the development yields to some extent. Probably you go to Germany, which is obviously perceived as super strong and super protected, downside protected. Yields are going to be tighter, but you will not find the magnitude you have in terms of different pricing on the sovereign bonds. Then maybe it's fine. I would say it depends a bit on your timing horizon. The good thing with student housing is that, contrary to maybe an office property where you're going to buy a property, 6-year lease, you hold it for 3-4 years, you have 2 years left, bad timing, you want to exit, but you cannot renegotiate your lease. You have too much uncertainty and you take a big hit there. If you invest in student housing for a property for 10 years, for instance, you have more security, I think, on the income side. The student business will not go away to some extent. And if you're able to withstand and to stay put with your investment, I think you can live with this kind of pricing mismatch between the bond side and the real estate side. We saw it. We invested in 2011 on a debt portfolio in Spain. It was a bit early before the main euro crisis. So the market froze. The reality is that the market came back so much by then that we're almost back, to the kind of level of expectations we had at the time, and we didn't put financing on it, and that's how we ran through this cycle. And now you see prices which are recovered tremendously, like 2-3 years later. Yeah. So if you can maintain liquidity, basically it's a big plus, and you can reflect that somewhat in the pricing and accept maybe tighter yields than you would compared to the sovereign risk, theoretically. And then it's a matter of cities. If you go to Barcelona, it's an international city, you can probably insulate the kind of macro country risk because it's a key gateway city to some extent for students. Yeah. And you can think a bit also with this view.
Is that a trend that you would say as well, that to focus on the capitals across Europe, wherever you are?
Yes, I think as an international investor, you're looking at the international cities and universities of international renown, so that you can go to your board and say, we're investing in, whether it's Munich or say Heidelberg that's got, Toulouse that has got a very strong engineering background. People know the university, and therefore, that sort of safety net, rather than say in France compared to somewhere like a Dijon or somewhere like that is probably a little more sort of regional. So there is that, but it's also there are a number of investors here who are looking at that more local market and looking at developing their own platform on a wider number of cities. It's very much up to that sort of investment committee. But
if you did that on a local level, then I assume you would these investors would go in with a local partner. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Certainly.
Okay. We've only got a couple more minutes, so I just want to check that we haven't got any more questions, burning questions anywhere.
Yeah. Hi, it's Kevin Williamson from Unite Students. Just going back to the partnership that Harold and Rainer were talking about, and the universities not wanting to collaborate. And there's lots of examples in the UK where there's collaboration with UK universities, not where they're providing an underwrite, but where they can assist from the political level, planning level, with local councillors. I was just thinking about regulations across Europe. So clearly there's something that doesn't quite stack up here in terms of speaking to universities. They're not either willing to engage, or the engagement isn't at the right level within the particular certain markets. And at that point, if it's in alignment with the university, hopefully the investment will follow, whether there's an underwrite or not, because there'll be alignment with those particular institutions. So what's the appetite generally? Is it's just a stonewall silence, or?
No, I think I think there's an interest, and I think my comment was focused on the marketing of the apartments. I mean, obviously, there is an interest, and knowing that people can stay there and sleep there as well, and then there's some engagement. But I think for me, it comes back to how the universities are funded. And I think Hauke was saying it, he's paying it out of his tax money. And I mean, Professor van der Bellen, the focus of the universities has not so much been on the housing side. But I think it is, once you come to UK levels of international students and their difficulties of finding space, it becomes much more of an issue. If your parents have studied medicine in a little regional village in Germany and you're going there again and you still have and they have bought a flat there or something like that, it's still simple for them. Once you have more international, it becomes a little bit tricky, and I think then becomes the engagement as well. But I think the major difference is what universities try to achieve. And I think that the example of the UK universities, or they make a lot of money with international students. And that is a main driver for their business because they're kept in their own market, what they can charge for tuition. And then compare it to a case where the universities are not even in the business of trying to get money from the clients they're serving. I started in Vienna, I started in the US, and I remember one sentence, a question I got from a US teacher that I said, I'm surprised to have that much interaction, that much engagement, and he said, so what's your tuition in Austria? And I said, we're not paying anything. And he said to me, so you're getting what you pay for. And that was for me worth the whole tuition.
Okay, that's always a good thing to do. Try and sum it up in one sentence.
Yes.
Have we got any more questions? No, otherwise I'm going to try and sum it up in one question, or at least, it's actually a question. We had at the beginning of this session, I had a slide with the title of my magazine a year ago.
Yes.
And I'm beginning to think maybe it was a bit too provocative. I said, student housing goes mainstream. Was that too soon?
From my point of view, I don't think that is too soon. I think it is becoming a global asset class in its own right. That we're seeing investment around the globe into the UK, whether it's sort of Singapore, Canadian, whether it's sovereign wealth.
But you're talking again Anglo-Saxon, non-European.
But I think that it will certainly start to emerge in the European market over the next sort of couple of years as platforms are developed.
So it's fair to say it's not mainstream yet in Europe. There's a divide.
Probably between the UK and depending on UK may be out of Europe soon, but who knows?
Okay. Do you agree?
Yes, definitely. I think when you look at continental Europe, it's the asset class. For sure, it's an immature asset class, but it's the asset class that provides the highest growth perspective for the next decade. And I'm dealing with that now for 4 years or so, and the mood has significantly changed. When I talked in 2010 to institutional investors in Germany about student accommodation, what are you talking about? And what is this? That has completely changed. The public perception has changed, and also the investors look at it from a total different angle, and I'm quite convinced that we will see the continent boost starting in the next 12 to 24 months tremendously.
Okay, great. That's a lovely, upbeat, optimistic note to end on. Can you add anything to that, Harold?
It still will be small, but I think it goes... Small can be mainstream as well, and I think if you compare to some, it rides the education trend, and that is a very strong element to it, because retail and real estate investments, you're riding against the Amazons of this world trend, and I'm not sure that's a fight I would like to do. So the education trend, I think, is a great wave, and it's what Europe is about.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I'd like to ask you all to join in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.